right, we are going to go through the study guide for Module 4, and this first video will be about Lesson 4.1, which is kind of like Introduction to Polynomials. That's what we're going to be talking about here. And when we talk about polynomials in 4.1, talked about the terms of it. Remember, terms are separated by add and subtract signs, and we talked about the degree and the coefficient. And so we're going to identify on number 1 the degree and the coefficient on each of these terms, right? So this is just one term. So if I'm looking at the degree, right, so the degree is talking about the variable, right? So if we're thinking about x, right, there's no exponent written on there, but really there's an invisible 1 there, right? So x to the first power. So the degree of this 5x is 1. Where the coefficient is the number in front, so that would be 5. Right? On part B, our degree is 2, because we're looking at the exponent there. And our coefficient is -6. Make sure you don't just think it's 6, that negative is still part of it. All right? Now on part C, when we're talking about the degree of this, remember that this is like an x to the first and a y to the first. And so when we have more than one different variable in there, we add those degrees together. So the degree of this is 2. And then again, our coefficient is out in front, so that would be 7. All right. Looking at part D, right, we got an a squared and a b. So again, if we add those exponents together, that's going to give us 3, which is our degree. And the number out in front of all of it is 14, so that's our coefficient. All right, and then the last one, let's see what we have here. So a to the first, b to the second, c to the third, so 1 plus 2 plus 3 is going to give me 6. So this is a degree of 6, and the coefficient is -17. Okay. All right, so that's being able to, figure out between degrees, coefficients, and stuff like that. The second thing in 4.1, another thing we talk about, is evaluating polynomials. All right, so when you're asked to evaluate these polynomials, they'll tell you what they want you to put in place of x, and you'll put that in, and then go ahead and evaluate it. So in this one, 5 is what we're going to be putting in, but I want you to remember that whenever you take out variables, all right, you're going to put those variables in parentheses when you put this back in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move this over here to the side so it's a little bit easier to see. So when I'm evaluating p of 5, right, that means I'm going to have negative, and I'm just going to go ahead and put my blanks in here so you can see what I mean. When I take out these variables, the number that I put in is going to go in parentheses, right? And 5 is the number that it's telling me to put in there. All right, and that makes a difference if it's there or not on some problems, so it's important to make sure that you see that. Right? So if we go ahead and evaluate this, right, remember our order of operations, we have to do our exponent first, so 5 squared, and then times it by this negative out in front, which is like a -1, right? So that's going to be -25 on this part. 4 times 5 is 20, and then -1. And then if we combine those all together, -25 plus 20 is -5, minus 1 is negative 6. Right? So our answer on that one is negative 6. I'll just put this kind of over here as 2a, because that was the first example there. All right, let's do our second example on it, and this time we have a negative number that we're putting inside. And so with those you need to be pretty careful, right? So this time it's telling us we're putting negative 3 in place of x, right? So I'm trying to find what is p of negative 3. Right, of this polynomial. That's here. Remember, it's x minus 2x squared, right? But in place of those x's, I'm going to just kind of leave some blanks to remember that I need to put my number in parentheses there, right? So I'm going to put my negative 3 in both of my parentheses, and then just use the order of operations to simplify it. So I can see here I need to square that first. So negative 3 squared is positive 9, and then times by that negative 2 is going to give me negative 18. Right? And then I have my negative 3 out in front. So negative 3 minus 18 is going to give me negative 21. Okay, so just be careful when you're putting those in. Sometimes it's easy to forget what you need to do there to get the answer the right way. All right, on part 3, we're adding these together, and I like to just write these, when I'm adding these together, just one on top of each other. So I'm going to take this second one that I have here and add it to the first one. So I'm just going to put 7x squared minus 9x plus 4, so that I have these kind of lined up, right, in columns, so I can see that a little bit better. And then when I add those together, right, 4x squared and 7x squared, they have to be like terms in order to add them together. So I can only add x squareds with x squareds. So that's going to give me 11x squared. Then I'll add my x terms together. 5 minus 9 is negative 4x. And then 4 plus 1 is going to give me 5. And so that's what I would get when I add those together. Okay. All right, and then with subtraction, there's a few things that you need to remember on this also. So this word from kind of tricks people, right? So we're saying subtract 3x squared plus 7x minus 1 from this other polynomial, right? Well, that means that the 7x squared is the one going first. Think about, if you just had, if somebody said subtract 3 from 8, you would do 8 minus 3, right? So if we're subtracting these polynomials, same kind of thing. So the 7x squared is our first thing there, okay? And then subtract this other part. Now what I want to do on this, because really when I have that subtract out in front of this, what's happening is I'm really distributing a negative 1 through to everybody. All right, and so then when I write that down underneath it, I'm going to write it down already distributed through. So negative 1 times 3x squared, right, because this is subtracting it. So that's going to give me a minus 3x squared. And then the same thing, I got to distribute that negative through to everybody, and that's a part that a lot of people miss on this. So negative 1 times 7x is negative 7x. And then negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Right? And now I can just, since I distributed that negative through, now I'm just combining those terms together to get my answer. All right? So if I combine my x squared terms, 7x squared minus 3x squared is going to give me 4x squared. Add my x's together, that'll give me negative 9x. and negative 4 plus 1 is a negative 3. So there is my answer if I subtract those. Right? So on example 2, it's still a subtraction problem, but it looks a little bit different. All right, I'm going to probably do this one over here to the side so it's a little bit easier to see. All right, so on number 4, I just rewrite it out here. So we're taking this polynomial and we're subtracting off this other polynomial. Right? But look at that negative, right, that's out in front here. So this is what I mean. If I distribute that negative through, then it's going to really become plus all of these negatives. So for some people, it's just helpful to think about this as like a negative 1 that needs to be distributed through. Okay? And again, when I do that, I like to line it up underneath so I have my like terms lined up. So when I do that, negative 1 times t squared is negative t squared. Then negative 1 times 2t is negative 2t. And negative 1 times negative 6 is a positive 6. All right, so it helps to just distribute those through first, and then really what we're doing is we're adding these together now. Right? And so that's going to give me 3t squared. All right, remembering that you can only add like terms together. All right, minus 9t, and then plus 5. So that's what this is going to equal when we combine those together.